This is Robert Casanova. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Rachel and I are going to share our experience with ExamSoft and mostly with using the rubrics. We have no disclosures, sadly, so if you can think of anything that we can do, that'd be really awesome. But our goals is that by the end of the session, you're going to look at some of our favorite parts of ExamSoft rubrics, namely the categories, the item analysis, and the strengths and opportunities. And also, Rachel's going to show you how to set up simple rubrics for grading standardized patient encounters. And I do want to emphasize simple because you want to start simple and then sort of start adding things as you get more courage, because it's really sort of a journey to get buy-in from your faculty. Most people are scared, but once they realize just how easy it can be, then they're on board. So you want to start simple and really win those first few people. So I want to start with what our issue was and how I got interested in this. So the main thing is that we do these standardized patient encounters at the end of every single clerkship. So every 8 weeks, we have what we call OSCEs, but they're really just a single standardized patient encounter that occurs on every single campus for all 180 students. And what happened is that as time went by, we realized that we had an issue with comparability. We also, at the end of every year, have 6 encounters for all 180 students that occurs on the same week, and we had issues with trying to get everybody to do the same thing and grade them similarly. And what we were finding is that they were changing scenarios, so Amarillo would change it just a little bit, Midland Odessa would add a question, change a question, they would change the grading without looking at any item analysis, and the feedback to learners was really splotchy because everybody didn't even take the same test. So the more we delved into ExamSoft, the more we discovered all of these issues that honestly we weren't really aware of, but a lot of this is driven by the distance. And from Amarillo, which is our northernmost campus, to Midland, Odessa, it's about 260 miles. And so for those of you on the East Coast, that just imagine that from New York City to Boston is 210 miles. That's pretty big distance. So it's from Lubbock, which is the main campus, which is where I am, to Amarillo, it's about 2 hours. To Midland, Odessa, it's about 2 hours. We have a 4th campus that just opened that is just 1 mile from the main campus, so that's been actually really awesome to have that proximity. So I couldn't really be on all of these different sites to make sure that everything went well, and so that was one of the biggest issues. The other issue is this thing called LCME, the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, and they have an element 8.7, which is comparability of education and assessment, and basically it says that equivalent methods of assessments across all locations within a given course and clerkship are to be administered. And since I am in charge of the 3rd-year clerkship, my main task is comparability. So I spend a lot of time driving to the different campuses, talking to the different people that are in charge of the simulation center and the actual standardized patient encounters to do my best to make sure that everybody is doing the same thing. To compound this, we have an LCME site visit March of 2017, and it's been on my calendar for over a year. So that was a really big impetus for us to do something. So the solution to us really came from ExamSoft, and I was actually at the AAMC meeting in fall of 2014, and I stopped by the ExamSoft booth there because our 1st and 2nd year we're using ExamSoft to generate multiple choice questions and look at the item analysis and whatnot. So I stopped by and I saw this huge poster that said introducing rubrics, and so I said, what the heck is a rubric? And I realized that it was something that I could use to grade these OSCEs, and so I said, is anybody doing that? And they said, of course. Well, that's the only time ExamSoft has ever lied to me, because they weren't really doing it the way I thought they were doing it. Maybe I just misunderstood. But what it really offered for us is control over the grading rubric. Once everybody agrees on the exam is exactly the same on all the campuses. Item analysis was really important, and as you heard at the beginning, I'm getting my master's in medical education, and one of the things I like to look at is the item analysis. Is this a good question? Is this a bad question? If it's an important item, do we need to tweak the question? What do we need to do? And it gives us incredible control over feedback to the students. Before ExamSoft, and I'll show you later, I used to do a 90-minute debrief after the big all-campus exam at the end of the year, and the students would be bored to tears because most of the stuff didn't really apply to them. And most of all, it gave us LCME comparability, which is something that I was really seeking. So Rachel's going to show you what we have to do for the setup.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. When Dr. Casanova approached me in January of 2015 that he wanted to completely change how the grading was, I was less than excited about having to tell physicians that had been grading the OSCE one way for years that we were going to now move to using it online. And some of them, there was a big variability on technology experience. So this was challenging for everyone. So when we rolled it out with one clerkship on our Lubbock campus. It was actually our OBGYN clerkship. There was just 11 students. We used one clerkship director. She was able to get familiar with ExamSoft, see how easy the grading was, and she really liked it. And so then at that point, we rolled it to we had a small group of students that had to take the all-campus OSCE that we have at the end of the year. They had to take it early in February. And so then we rolled it over to them, and we were able to assign graders, which I'll show you in just a minute, the process, and that worked really well. And then we rolled it to everyone, and I would advise anybody that's wanting to start it to really start small. As Dr. Casanova said, starting simple works much easier. It doesn't seem as daunting. At first it kind of is. It's a little overwhelming, but once you get in there and really figure out how to do everything and figure out ExamSoft, you will not believe that you used to do it any other way. So let's go through the setup. The steps for adding multiple graders on different campuses. Obviously, you start with building your rubric, which we'll go into a little bit in just a minute. The next thing that you want to do is create your courses. Now, because of our exam takers being on so many different campuses, you aren't able to establish your exam takers within a campus, mainly because they shift among the clerkships. We have 6 clerkships, and they shift from period to period. So you have to make a course for each period that you have, and we have 6 periods throughout an academic year. So you assign your exam takers to that course, and then you're going to go through and build your assessment and post it to the course. So let's start at building the rubric. This is just kind of a simple rubric that we did. It just has 5 dimensions. Those are actually also called rows. Those are all the different questions that you want to ask that if the exam taker is fulfilling them. Now, this particular rubric has 3 columns in them, or performance levels, and they each have signed value. There's 4 points, 2 points, and then 0 points. With our OSCEs, when they get to the 3rd year, it's just either they have it in the note or they don't. So it's fairly simple. In our 1st and 2nd year medical curriculum, actually the performance levels are they give partial credit, but once they get to be 3rd year, we don't do that. So building your rubric, and then these are all the different courses that we have, and you'll see how I labeled them. I just used the section or the course number for a particular course, and then I just labeled them. Like the first one says psychiatry block 5, and it has the year, and then family medicine block 4 and has the year, and so forth. So whatever block we're in, I label that right afterwards, because when you go to post your assessment to your course, all your courses that you've done throughout the year may show up, so you want to make sure that you post it to the right course. Okay, so you've posted your assessment, and I haven't gone into detail on exactly how to post the assessment, but ExamSoft has an outstanding tutorial in their resource library that we'll show you at the end of our webinar. There are great videos and step-by-step how-to guides that would do a much better job than what I did, so I kind of left that part out. There's also great how-to guides on how to build a rubric. So that was the first place that we started, was in the resource library. So when you start that, I would suggest starting there as well. So you've posted your assessment. Now this is the part that we specifically use because we have multiple graders and multiple students on multiple campuses. So after you post your assessment, you're going to hit the grade button, which is right there. The next section, the next screen that comes up, there's two separate tabs. There's a basic grading tab and then advanced grading. When we started this, every time we brought the assessment up, we said, why is this not the same view? And we would call ExamSoft and they would say, you need to click on the advanced grading assignments and then you can see where your graders are. We messed up on that a lot. Okay, so you hit on advanced grading and you'll see that you have a couple of options. The first one is your blue tab that says add grader assignment, or you can do it right by your rubric. Either way is going to get you to the same location. So you're going to hit add grader assignments and then select graders. Then at this point, you're going to come to your manage graders screen. There's a couple of features on here that you want to make sure that you have selected. The first one is one grader per exam taker. Now this is the default for this, so it should be on there. But sometimes I've noticed a couple of times it's on multiple grader per exam taker. What that feature does is it would allow, for example, Dr. Casanova and I both to grade the student, but whoever grades last is the grade that's there. So if I graded and then he went in to grade that same student, my scores wouldn't be there. He would be able to see what I did, but his last scores that he entered are the ones that would count for the student. So you just want to make sure that's on one grader per student. And it's important that that default setting, or that one grader per exam taker, is there before you start assigning graders, before you start assigning exam takers to your graders, because if you have to go back and change it to one exam taker, then everything you've done will be lost. So you want to make sure that's first, that you click that first. Okay, and then the next thing that you want to do is click select individual ETs, which is exam takers. This is really important because it defaults to randomly assign ETs, which would be great if all of your exam takers and all of your graders were on one campus. When they're not on one campus and they're distributed different places, then that randomly assigned will not work. Again, you want to make sure that's on select individual ETs before you start assigning your students, or when you go back to change it, everything you've done will be lost. Okay, so the next thing you do is you find your exam taker, and this one is me. So I clicked right by my name in the box, and then you're going to click the green button, the green plus button. So it brings you to your next screen to assign, to pick which students you want to assign to. And so you just go through. I'm with the Covenant Branch campus, so I would go through and check all the students that are on the Covenant Branch. And before you go out of this screen, and forgive me for not showing you, but at the bottom of this screen there's a save button, and you want to make sure you save it or it won't be saved. So you hit your save button, and then the next screen is Dr. Casanova. Now, for this particular rubric, he and I are the only ones grading. So then you can click Show Only Unassigned Exam Takers. That's kind of a safety net that ExamSoft puts in there, so you are making sure that you're assigning all the students. And if you have some of our clerkships have 21 to 30 students per on all 4 campuses. So that's a lot of students to wade through to see which ones haven't been assigned yet. But if you just click that Show Only Unassigned Exam Takers, it just brings those up. And then also, if you're on the last grader, you can click the box up to the left, and then it will highlight all of those names. And then again, you hit the Save button. And another safety net that ExamSoft puts in is this bar at the top, and it shows you when all of the students have been assigned, and it shows it at 100%. So that way it lets you know that every student that's been put in that course has been assigned. And the reason why this is crucial is if you haven't assigned a student to a grader, once grading starts, you can't change anything. You can't go in and assign that student to, I couldn't go in and assign it to Dr. Casanova. Now you can go in and assign him to another grader, but you couldn't assign that student to Dr. Casanova. So it's really important that you're paying attention to these safety nets that ExamSoft puts in for you. The last thing that you're going to need to do on Manage Graders is look at your start and end times. This is important that you have the correct start date, and our start dates we usually do at least a day or two before the actual encounter begins, just so it gives the grader time to go ahead and log in. And in just a minute, Dr. Casanova is going to go over the email that they receive. So that gives them a couple of days notice to know they're about ready to have some grading to do. And the other thing that's important is the end grading dates. Now, I tell my physicians that once grading is over, that's it. I can't do anything. But really you can. If you have a physician that either needs to regrade or hasn't graded yet, then you can actually go in and change that end date. But I don't let them know that. Then another thing that you need to do is a reminder. Now when grading is open, for instance, this one was on 6/8/16, Dr. Casanova and I would have received an email the day that it opens, but then we may not get anything afterwards. So you want to make sure that your reminder is, and that the reminder gives them a couple of days notice. Like if we have an exam on a Wednesday, I usually try to send the reminder Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, even Sunday afternoon, to remind them that they have something to grade. Those have been a lifesaver for several of our physicians, and they all get the email, they all get the reminder regardless if they finished or not, and they keep getting a reminder until it's all been completed. So it kind of is a little bit of a peer pressure thing for our clerkship directors. They've kind of turned it into a game on who can grade the fastest, and they send a bulk email saying, oh, I finished. So the reminder keeps going regardless if they finished, and once everybody's finished, then the reminder won't go out anymore.
So on this screen we have a reminder on July 7th, July 3rd. Obviously it would be before the end date,
Yeah.
So that's a little error there. So it would probably be June 21st, 23rd, 24th, so that we can really remind them and keep them on target.
And actually, I must not have saved this one yet, because ExamSoft will not let you save it if your reminder is after the grading end period. So it gives you a red message at the top that says reminder must be before the end of grading. So you wouldn't even be able to save this. So I must have done this and not saved it.
You probably did it on purpose just to keep us out of trouble.
That's right. So the next thing that you have to remember before your managed grading is you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom and hit save again. This lesson was learned the hard way, actually more than once on our end. So always hit save. Okay, so the next thing, once you've assigned everyone in your, all of your students, you'll get to that advanced grading again, and it says value is at 100%, and that's what you want. You want the multiple graders at 100%. Kind of the lesson that we learned on this is, for instance, if I'd add Dr. Casanova and myself, and I decided to come back and add another physician, what I did one time was I hit the add grader assignments, because that's what I did originally. So if you do that, instead of clicking on the pencil that's over by their name, if you hit the add grader assignment, then you're actually adding a whole nother category, if you will, within the grading. And when it happened one time, all of the students' scores seemed off, like their averages seemed off. And we actually had to call support at ExamSoft, and they stayed up pretty late getting an Excel sheet for us that had their two scores and averages, and they were a huge lifesaver to us because that was just, again, one of the pitfalls we didn't know. So if you have to go back and add an additional grader to this rubric, make sure you click the pencil instead of doing the add grader assignment. It will save you a whole lot of trouble in the end.
So let's talk about the setup for the graders. This is the part that I took care of because I really would interface with all the clerkship directors, and my job was to develop champions, which is why we started with that one OB-GYN clerkship director. I'm the Department of OB-GYN. She's a really good friend of mine. I talked her into it. I really sweetened the pot and told her she was a pioneer. And of course, there's some resistance, but once you realize how easy it was, she was sold. And I think it's important to develop those early physician champions. So Rachel told you how we set that. They get an email when you first post this. And we generally post it a couple of days before the exam actually is. And what I tell the clerkship directors, I send them an email ahead of time, and I tell them, you're going to get an email from support@examsoft.com. Do not throw it away. Do not send it to trash. If you don't get it by tonight, call me. It probably went into your, weird folder. And this is what the email looks like. I love the email because literally there's not much you can do except for click right there where that arrow is. And so when they click there, what happens is they go to this login screen, and all you can do is just go in there and log in. It's really pretty simple. Now, there is a little bit of prep work that you have to do to this, and there's a great video on setting this up, on setting up your graders. You basically go to the setup grader screen, you put in their names and their email address, and when you select, they show up on the selection screen that we just showed you, and when you select them, they'll get notified if they have something assigned. Now, my second favorite thing is that when you click down there on login, this is what they get, and there's not much else that you can do except for grade the assignments and click here, which, I hate to be rude, but sometimes we have a group of people that we're trying to guide through, and they have a hard time even just logging into any website and changing the email address or the password, so it's pretty easy. Once you get here and you click on grade assignment, you get another one of these. It's pretty simple. All it has is the name of the assessment, which for them would be like OB-GYN, OSCE number 3. It have their grading progress. This one hasn't started yet. And then up here is a nice little thing that says grade. So you just click on grade, and you get to this screen. Here's all of your exam takers. Here's your progress. They haven't even really started. So you just click on here and start your grade 1 to grade the first one. And here's the rubric that Rachel has set up from before. So basically our rubrics would be, did they introduce themselves? Did they use open-ended questions? Did they counsel on tobacco use? If they're grading a physical exam and your standardized patient is grading a physical exam, it'll go through the different components. And here you can set up your scoring system, and you can choose any score you want, either 1 and 0, or in this case we chose 4, 2, and 0. And you see up here there's a little comment box. I'll tell you, you can put comments here, but if you put them there, in order for them to see the comments, you have to release the entire rubric, and I'll show you what that is, what that looks like. We don't release our rubrics because we use the skeletons over and over and over, and we just sort of redo the case. It sort of defeats the purpose if they know exactly what you're looking for. They should know exactly what they're looking for because they're doing an OB-GYN case or a PD case, and not that. So instead, what we do is we put our comments here under overall comments, and these will show up even if you don't release the whole rubric, and so we'll show you how to do that. I do recommend that you put the comments in here. If your clerkship directors take the time to put in the comments, for example, they might say your history was incomplete. You need to remember that diabetes is a predisposing factor for endometrial cancer. Any of those comments, they show up at the end, and that gives a student incredible feedback.
Just to touch on what Dr. Casanova talked about with the login, whoever becomes your administrator for ExamSoft will have obviously a different access to ExamSoft than what your grader does. But on the admin tab, there is, you can click on it under exam taker users, and you can actually go in and have ExamSoft resend them a password. We've used that feature a lot. ExamSoft sends an email that says this is your password, your temporary password, go in and change it. And these are busy physicians, and sometimes they don't look at their emails, and sometimes just their assistants look at their emails. And so if you have a physician or someone that's one of your graders says, I don't know my password, then you can go into that admin tab and actually have ExamSoft send them a new password. So don't panic, because currently right now it doesn't have a feature on the login page that says forgot password. So you have to actually do that still on the admin part. We're hoping that will get added soon. Okay, so the next thing that I always like to do while my assessment is in progress, while the grading is in progress, is I like to give a friendly nudge to our graders if needed. So when I go log back in and go to my assessment, I can go back to my grade tab again, and then again hit advanced grading assignments instead of just basic grading. And it gives me a quick overview on everyone on how they're doing in progress. And you'll see that I'm at 11% and Dr. Casanova is at 0.
I'm very competitive, so that really irritates me.
So he's a little behind on grading. And so at this feature, what you can do is email selected graders, and you can just click on that button and it will email all of them. You can email some of them. You can just give a personalized reminder that comes from ExamSoft that says, don't forget to grade, I need these graded. And I've used that feature a whole bunch. And the next part under your grading tab is you can look at the basic grading. This gives you all of the exam takers. And again, this is an administrative view. The individual graders just get to view the students that they've been assigned to, but as an administrator to ExamSoft, I can look at everyone's and see how everyone's doing. And I can just click over on view grade on that particular student, and I can see how they've done on this OSCE.
So you're probably wondering, why the heck are we doing all of this? Wasn't it good enough just to do them on paper and they send them back to the main campus and we collate them on ExamSoft, we collate them on an Excel sheet? Well, in theory, yes. And there was a time when we looked at each other and thought, why the heck are we doing this? Especially if we'd made a fatal error and we're like regrading them on our own, which is why we think start small. But I'm going to go over some of the things that I just really think are worthwhile. And the first one is categories. The categories really let you look at what your learners are doing well on and what they're not doing well on. And the way that you do it is you start with your basic rubric. And here's a little thing that says categories. It's tiny, so I'll make it a little bit bigger. But this is where you click on categories, and it'll go to your big list of categories, and you can just assign it to whatever. So here it's establishing rapport. This was professionalism. You have a whole list that you compile on your own, and here's my partial list. So the categories are your link to a longitudinal assessment. Later on, I'll show you how you can see how your learners are doing from the very first ExamSoft rubric they did to the present. I want you to think ahead so you can use them on all of your clerkships. So the way that I did them here is I actually redid it several times, because every time I did it, I'd think of some new way. But basically, we have 2 rubrics that go together for every OSCE. One of them is a standard patient rubric, and it's very, very important. And the other one is a separate observed physical exam from the note from the physical note. So this is just a standardized patient encounter, and they have establishing rapport, counseling, professionalism, washing hands. If they observe a physical exam, it's all on here. Notice that here it says Docs and OSCEs. Docs is our doctoring course. It's development of clinical skills. It's a longitudinal first and second year course. And after I got this going, they started using these same categories on their little mini OSCEs. And what happened is I can actually look, I think starting next year, I'll be able to look from the first year through the end of third year to see how they're doing per category. It's very important. This shows you my entire category list, and I do admit I got a little bit carried away, but I basically did it in the same order as you would write a physical exam, and I have subcategories for the organ systems, and it works really, really well. So the next thing we love is the reports. And the reports is really what sets this apart, because I would never be able to generate individualized reports for 180 students 6 times a year, plus then 6 reports per student at the end of the year. When you click on your reports menu, it'll show you the summer report, a rubric analysis. This shows you just overall what the average is. This shows you how the rubric items did. Exam taker results, it shows you each student with their grade, and you can actually send them individual reports. A category report, one of my favorites. This releases the exam results. It lets you choose what is going to be released. And strengths and opportunities, for me as an administrator, I see the strengths and opportunities for the whole class. The student sees individualized report. Very, very important. So here you see the summer report with item analysis. This is your low score, your average score, the high score, and this circle here shows the red, which is basically the lowest. The little diamond, the little triangle is the average, and the green is the highest. This is what the summer report with item analysis would look for the individual rubric. So I get to see which questions just were good and worked very good, and which ones were really great. So just to go over it in a little bit more detail, in item analysis, you divide the class into the lower 27 percentile and the upper 27 percentile, and then the discriminatory index tells you, or discrimination index tells you, how well does this question discriminate between the upper students and the lower students. So a good discrimination index says that the upper 27% got it and the lower 27% did not. And so you can see here, that's my definition right here. So if it's 0, then there's no discrimination. But if it's really important, you have to decide if you're going to keep it or not. A positive score, the higher, the better. In a homemade test that's not really validated, you want your discrimination index to be about 0.2 or greater. If you're there, you're doing pretty well. So here we see a really great question. The discrimination index is 0.83. That's ridiculous. The upper 27%, 83% of them got it. The lower 27%, nobody got it. Overall, 55% of them got it. This one, though, is not discriminating because 100% of them got it. So what you have to decide is that important? Well, this is the opening statement. So it's an important thing. We're probably going to keep it and just decide, that's, we're just not going to look at the fact that everybody got it, because, assessment leads learning. So if they know it's going to be on there, they're going to learn it. Once you do that, then once you have everything graded and you have that, you can look at the longitudinal analysis, and you can include all of your courses, all the assessments. You can really look at a very granular level or a very grand level, and you'll get something like this. So here are my learners, and here are the different questions or the different categories. Okay, and this tells you what the group average is and each individual. So you can look at each individual person and say this person in the 69th percentile is well below the 83rd percentile group average. She needs to work on this. If you see something that the entire category is off, then you have to decide, are they not learning it as a group? Am I not teaching it well to them as an instructor, or is there something else going on? Is the question hazy? I think that that's really important. So the next thing is the student feedback. As I told you, we have these every 8 weeks, and then we have an all-campus, longitudinal clinical skills exam, which is 6 stations. And in the past, I had a 90-minute face-to-face with all of the students, through TechLink, which is our, distance learning cameras on all of the campuses. And I would go over each case and go over what was right and what was wrong, and the students would be bored to tears because the majority of this information did not apply to them. What happens with ExamSoft is your feedback is individualized. So you can do it this way, where this is the student score, this is the average score, and this is the actual rubric. So this is, greets the patient in a friendly manner, introduce the self, uses speech and language, which is understandable. But if you release this, then, it's sort of like giving them exactly what is going to be on the test. I'm not really opposed to them knowing that, because that's what we want them to learn, but you don't want to give away the whole thing. And so what we do is we don't actually release this part, we release this part. So here's your overall comments. We release the overall comments, but then they just have each category. So one of the categories is establishing rapport. They can see that they did blue, which is about average. Counseling, about average. Professionalism, about average. Thyroid exam, about average. And these little things will tell them, if it's something that needs review or needs improvement. So this is very individualized. Once we started doing this, I went from having to do that 90-minute face-to-face, and I would really love the clerkship directors to show up. But traditionally, they didn't. I did them all by myself, and now I probably, on an 8-week standardized patient, I probably get one phone call from 180 students. On the end of the year one, I really only get maybe 3 or 4 phone calls, and so those 90 minutes can become a 5-minute phone call or a 15 or 20-minute face-to-face visit, and it's just much more efficient on my time, and it's much better for the student because they know exactly what they did, exactly where they did well, and exactly what to work on.
Okay, a couple of things that we want to go over is lessons learned. When we started ExamSoft, they were actually, it was new for them, ExamSoft as well as us. I think we really helped each other. We had requests, and they kind of led us on what we needed to do, but then we also had some suggestions for demo as well. So we kind of made we made a oh no of things we learned along the way. The one thing that I repeatedly kind of messed up on in the beginning is once you've posted an assessment and grading has started, you're kind of stuck. If grading hasn't started yet, you can always delete the assessment, but then you have to go back in and post it and assign all your graders. But that's not horrible. It just takes some extra time. But once grading has started, you're stuck. Whatever you have, you have. And that's not necessarily an ExamSoft issue. Lots of softwares are kind of the same way. But if you want to add a student or delete a student to an assessment, once it's started, that's it. You can't do that. If you want to change any questions within the assessment, again, once grading has started, you can't do anything. And you also can't delete the assessment once it's started. If you decide one campus has already started grading or one clerkship has already started grading and you thought, oh no, I did that wrong, I need to do something wrong, you can't delete it. ExamSoft won't let you. And you can't change a rubric as well. So that goes on with changing the questions. And then once someone has graded someone, you can't ungrade them. You can regrade them. So if a clerkship director or a grader said, oh, I was looking at the wrong student written note when I graded John Smith, it was really Sue's, what can I do? There's a button that by each exam taker, once you've started grading, that says regrade. And a lot of people are scared because they think it will delete everything, but it won't. That particular student, you can go on Sue's name and you can click regrade, and your grading is still there. You can just go in and change your answers to whatever you need to. So don't be afraid to really play around with that. The ExamSoft is really good at putting programming in there that won't really let you mess much up.
If it can be messed up, we already did it.
I think that the ExamSoft Help Desk knows us by name.
So some of the things that make life easier, and because sometimes in the middle of all this, we look at each other and go, why are we doing this? Paper sounds pretty good. But the things that keep us going are on this table. The ability to adjust your exam takers' points, you can do it individually if you just say, we're going to get rid of that one question, or you can do it as a group if you're going to curve. You can change graders, so if in the middle of something, somebody has to leave town all of a sudden, they just don't get done with their grading, you can change graders. It's not a slam dunk, and so we really discourage that. The other thing to remember is some of our graders just share the password. There's nothing secure on here that Rachel's going to go and look at my information. Basically, when they log in, all they see is the grade assessment, and they click and they grade. So if there's 3 pediatricians who want to sort of take turns grading, then the 3 pediatricians just share their codes, or they'll share it with their coordinators, who sometimes will answer the standardized patient things. Emailing the exam takers and really releasing their individual strengths and opportunities is incredible. You basically have a list of them. You can click all or individual, and then you can send their individual strengths and opportunities. And you can do it to where you're releasing the rubric or you're not releasing the rubric. And it has a lot of different options. We have opted for not releasing the rubric, but releasing the general overall comments, and that has really worked incredibly for us. Of course, we couldn't do this without reminders, because sometimes we just need our little friendly reminder. And then releasing scores to campuses used to take us a really long time, and now we feel like we can do it in just a few minutes.
One of the features that I use a lot, and actually I've gotten pretty good at it, is changing the graders. When you go to your assessment and you do the add grader assignments, there on Manage Graders, you find whoever has emailed you at the last minute and said, hey, I can't grade after all. So you go to your name, and again, you click on the pencil, and this screen pops up to change grader. Now this feature was added probably a month or so after we started using ExamSoft, and it's a feature that we love. You're going to select a grader. Now, the only issue with doing this is that, say for instance, Dr. Casanova has decided that he wants to grade all of the students, even the ones that have been assigned to me. Well, in this particular rubric, he has already assigned grading, so I can't add students to him once the grading has already started. So because he's already on the grading rubric, but I can add another grader. Say his assistant Shay is going to grade 2. Well, she's not in the rubric graders that I've already assigned graders to, so I can reassign to her, but I can't assign to Dr. Casanova. Unfortunately, as I said back in the O's, that you can't add students once a grader's already started. But the grade change grader has been a lifesaver for us.
Speaking of other lifesavers, the features that really have made this worthwhile are really just the support that is built into ExamSoft. There are a lot of videos that will take you step by step on how to make a rubric, how to add graders, all of those sorts of things. And I would use that resource library and the interactive email e-learning simulations, and then the support system that they have that you can call in is really pretty amazing. They have been on and available for us, and have stayed way past their going home time. And that's really all we have. So we're open to questions.
Thank you both so very much. Once again, just as a reminder, you can place your questions in the questions field on the right-hand side of your screen there. We have a couple coming in now, so I'll go ahead and get started. The first one is, in regard to faculty buy-in, what was the largest criticism you received, and how did your program address it?
So probably our biggest criticism is, why do you want to change something that's okay? Because from the individual clerkship director, they see, and I was a clerkship director before this, you see your corner of the world, and why would you change it? You've gotten it down pat. The coordinator brings up the printed out, H&Ps, and you just grade it and you leave it alone, and they send it to me, and I do all of the work. And that was the hardest thing. I think that was number one. Number two is when people were just not computer savvy enough, and they were embarrassed to ask for help. And so we just made it very plain and simple that there's no harm in asking for help and no harm lost. But really, I think the hardest thing was that resistance to change. And so you have to get one change agent early on, somebody that you know is computer savvy, that's willing to just play. And we sort of did this as a game. Sometimes at 9 o'clock at night, it wasn't a game, but we did it as a game. And the first person that we had tried out was one of my best friends, who was the clerkship director for OB-GYN, and she had a great time with it, and she thought, well, that's just as easy, if not easier, than before. let's go with it. And so she became my champion. That's very important.
One thing that I did as a unit coordinator within the Office of Curriculum is I actually reached out to the coordinators and the assistants of the faculty members that we were wanting to change, and I taught them, showed them how to log in, showed them how to grade the rubric, actually visited some of the campuses. So it gave the coordinator some confidence. Then they could sit down with their clerkship director and say, okay, so this is how we did it. So it made it not quite so intimidating for the faculty members if they knew they had someone to call and help them. And I helped a lot over the phone. They all had my cell number. And I think once they did it the first time, then they felt better about it. And the main thing that really helped with faculty buy-in was the overwhelming response from the students on the feedback. They went on and on and on to the faculty members about how much better it was to have that feedback. And I think once the faculty members started hearing how the students embraced it and how they really enjoyed that feedback, then it really was just sold the deal for our faculty members.
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. The second question we have here is kind of on par with what you all just spoke about with the changing of graders. What happens if a grader has to step out for a reason and another faculty takes over for a student or two? Is the assignment of a new grader something that can be done on the fly?
Yes, yes. It's, it takes me probably about 30 seconds to go in, maybe a little bit longer, to log into ExamSoft. I go to the assessment, click on the little pencil, and you can change your grading. It's easy to do. The only it's a little bit more on steps if that actually person that's taking on grading isn't in as a grader for ExamSoft. But again, that's just in the admin tab. You just go in and add them. ExamSoft sends them an email. They get their password, and it's done. That takes a little bit longer than 30 seconds. That's probably about a 10-minute process. But if the grader is already in ExamSoft, then it's very simple to do.
Excellent. Do you have multiple rubrics in any of your assessments? And if so, how do you manage the weighing of the rubrics for the overall grade?
So yes, and so basically every clerkship we have a different standardized patient encounter, and every one of them has a standardized patient rubric, which is what this, and we try to make this mirror clinical skills exam. So the standardized patient assesses professionalism, establishing rapport, and any kind of physical exam and counseling. So that's one rubric, and we just got it straight off the. You go to the website, the CS website, and you download the PDF, and it tells you what they're looking for. And so we just made up questions about that. The second rubric is really about the written note. We do not watch the video to grade either one. Okay, so the SP grades their stuff on the fly in real time, and then we grade the note. And we grade, is there a chief complaint? Is there an opening statement that states, what the situation is? Is the history of present illness present? And just go through the different components. And then there's a clinical decision making, and what's the plan? So we go through all of those, and every one of those, every OSCE has those two components, and we put them together into an assessment. So that means that 8 weeks after school starts, we have 12 of these going around that become 6 assessments. The next 8 weeks, we have a whole new set of them. The next 8 weeks, we have a whole new set of them. And then at the end of the year, we have 6 stations. So there's 6 brand new, so that's the 7th one for the year. We do recycle them. We generally will review them, and I like to use the item analysis to tweak them if a question was bad, if we feel like something is getting too carried away as far as too many details, and we sort of eliminate them. So they are tweaked, and we change them enough that, sometimes we keep the same name, but when you read them, it's really different. So that's how we do it. And then as far as the weighting, we have expanded it so that there's enough questions that we feel that the student can miss a few questions and still get over the 90th percentile, which is honors. We do curve also. And so the weighting, there's generally probably 2 to 3 times more on the second rubric than there is on the standardized patient rubric. We try to break it down as small as possible. Now, there's a lot of those who will tell you that the written note rubric should be very basic. There should be only things that are high yield. But we do a lot of thoroughness questions. So on the OB-GYN exam, for example, even if it's a postmenopausal woman, we want to know her obstetrical history, her sexual history, those kind of things, because we want to make sure they can do a complete gynecology history. We use the videos if the student has a question. If they say, you know, I washed my hands and the SP said I didn't. So we'll look and see if they indeed washed their hands, or if there's some trend going where everybody's getting some item wrong, just to see if the SP has changed their story, but it is not obligatory. That's how we do it. We try to make it reasonable, and if it's not reasonable despite our efforts, we do curve.
When I am posting the assessment, as far as the weighting goes, I take how many questions we have in the first rubric and how many questions we have in the second rubric, and I get a number anywhere from 40 to 50, and then I just divide them, and usually it's a pretty even split. Usually it's about 20% for the standardized patient and about 80% for the written note, whatever the combination is to get to 100. And those were actually numbers that the clerkship directors got together and decided, okay, we want the written note to weigh more than the standardized patient encounters. In internal medicine, they actually have 4 rubrics within their assessment, and they just went through and decided, okay, these 2 components are worth 25%, the standardized patient is worth 10%, and then the remaining is for the written note. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. It's either up to whoever is giving the exam, or you can go through like I do and just add them all up and divide and split it that way.
Excellent, thank you. We have one final question as we're running low on time here. And it is, are the graders marking the rubrics on site during the OSCE, or is it happening after the test? And how are they basing their grades? So are they doing it with notes, or are they using an iPad or a PC?
So it varies. The standardized patient's grade, so the student comes in and spends 15 minutes, they step out. The standardized patient they actually grade on paper or on the computer in the simulation center. They don't grade directly onto ExamSoft, and it's because we have to have, for our institution, valid at ttuhsc.edu emails, and our standardized patients do not, and they also change out a lot, so we have no way to make sure that that room is always the same thing, but they grade in real time. The faculty does not grade in real time. They grade based on the documentation. And this is based on the premise that this student needs to write a complete note that somebody who sees the patient later on that day or later in the week can figure out what's going on. Also, if you didn't write it, it didn't happen. So I don't care if they did a chest exam. If they didn't write it down, it didn't happen. And so they actually grade. Some people actually do go to the simulation center, and as soon as the student finishes that note, we can send them a PDF or print a PDF, and that's what they're grading off of. But they're not grading from direct observation. The faculty does not use direct observation because they're grading the written note.
Excellent, thank you so much. If you all should have any other questions, feel free to email me at cterry@examsoft.com, and I will make sure that the questions are passed along and answered as well. Again, this webinar has been recorded, and you will receive an email with a link to the recording in the next couple of days, so please be on the lookout for that. And once again, when you close out of the webinar, you'll receive a survey that we really appreciate if you filled out so that we can continue to provide relevant content for you all throughout the remainder of the year. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah.